Jake Morrison stood on the bridge of his ship, looking out at the stars. He had been exploring space for 15 years, but something felt different today. His ship, the Starbound, moved quietly through the darkness near Proxima Centauri. The crew was busy with their usual work, checking instruments and recording data about distant planets. "Captain, we're picking up some strange signals," called out a communications officer, Danny Price. The young man had been with Jake for 3 years and rarely got excited about anything, but now his voice had an edge to it. Jake walked over to Danny's station. "What kind of signals?" "Multiple ships, sir. Big ones. They're not using any frequencies we know about." Danny's fingers moved quickly over his controls. "I count at least 50 vessels, maybe more. They're moving toward Earth's outer colonies." Dr. Lisa Carter looked up from her science station. She was the best xenobiologist in the fleet, and Jake trusted her judgment completely. "Captain, I need to see those signals. If these are alien ships, this will be first contact." Jake nodded, put on the main screen. The display showed a complex pattern of energy readings. Lisa studied them carefully, her face growing serious. "These aren't exploration vessels. Look at the power signatures. These are warships." The bridge fell silent. In all of humanity's years in space, they had never encountered hostile aliens. There had been rumors and theories, but no proof. Now it seemed that proof was heading straight toward human space. "Can we decode their communications?" Jake asked. Lisa worked at her station for several minutes. "I'm getting fragments. Their language is complex, but I think I can make out some words. They call themselves something like Zephyrians, and they're talking about humans." Jake felt his stomach tighten. "What are they saying about us?" "It's not good, Captain. They think we're expanding too fast. They see us as a threat to something they call the galactic balance." Lisa looked up from her screen. "They're afraid of us." Danny suddenly straightened in his chair. "Captain, I'm picking up more signals. These are coming from further out. It looks like a massive fleet." The main screen updated with new data. Red dots appeared across the display, each one representing an alien warship. There were hundreds of them, all moving toward human space in a coordinated pattern. Jake stared at the screen. "How long until they reach Earth?" "At their current speed, about 6 hours." Danny replied. "Get me a channel to Earth Defense Command. Priority Alpha." The communication system crackled to life, and Admiral Ben Walker's face appeared on the screen. Walker was an old friend of Jake's father and had been commanding Earth's defenses for over a decade. "Jake, what's your status?" Walker asked. "Admiral, we have a problem. A big one." Jake quickly explained what they had discovered. Walker's expression grew darker with each word. "How certain are you about their intentions?" Walker asked. Lisa stepped into view of the camera. "Admiral, I've been analyzing their communications for the past hour. They're definitely planning an attack on Earth. They believe that if they destroy our homeworld, the colonies will surrender without a fight." Walker was quiet for a long moment. "They're wrong about that, but we need to prepare for the worst. Jake, I need you to get this information to every colony as fast as possible. Use the emergency broadcast network." "Yes, sir. But Admiral, what about Earth's defenses?" Walker's face was grim. "We'll do what we can. But if they have the numbers you're reporting, it's going to be difficult. The orbital platforms can handle a lot, but not hundreds of warships." Jake felt helpless. His ship was designed for exploration, not combat. "Is there anything we can do?" "Stay out of their way and keep recording everything. If the worst happens, the colonies will need to know exactly what they're facing." The communication ended, and Jake turned to his crew. They were all looking at him, waiting for orders. These people had followed him across the galaxy, trusting him to keep them safe. Now he might be leading them into the biggest crisis in human history. "Danny, broadcast our findings to every human outpost and colony. Use all available channels. Tell them what's coming." "Already on it, Captain." Lisa was back at her station, still working on the alien communications. "Captain, I'm learning more about these Zephyrians. They're not just one species. It's a coalition of 6 different alien races. They've been working together for centuries to maintain what they call galactic stability. And they see us as unstable? Exactly. Humans have only been in space for a few decades, but we've already established colonies in 12 star systems. That's faster than any species they've encountered before. They think we're too unpredictable, too aggressive. Jake laughed bitterly. Aggressive? We've never even fired a shot at another intelligent species. They don't see it that way. To them, our rapid expansion looks like preparation for conquest. They've decided to stop us before we become too powerful. The next few hours passed in tense silence. Jake watched the alien fleet move steadily toward Earth. His crew continued to monitor their communications, learning more about the enemy with each passing minute. The Zephyrians were confident. Their messages to each other showed no doubt about the outcome of the coming battle. They expected to destroy Earth's defenses quickly and force humanity to surrender. They had no idea what they were about to unleash. Danny suddenly turned from his station. Captain, I'm losing contact with Earth. The alien fleet is jamming all communications in the inner system. Jake felt his heart sink. Whatever was about to happen to Earth, they would have to watch it from a distance. There was nothing they could do to help. Keep trying to raise them. And make sure our records are being transmitted to the outer colonies. Whatever happens next, humanity needs to know. As Jake watched the alien fleet approach Earth, he thought about his family back home. His sister lived in Chicago. His parents were in a retirement community in Florida. By tomorrow, they might all be gone. But he also thought about the colonies. Millions of humans living on dozens of worlds, building new lives among the stars. The aliens thought destroying Earth would break humanity's spirit. They were about to learn how wrong they were. The silence before the storm was ending. Soon, the galaxy would discover what humans were truly capable of when pushed to their breaking point. The first plasma bolt hit New York at exactly 6:47 a.m. Eastern Time. The city's morning rush was just beginning when the sky lit up with alien fire. From orbit, massive Zephyrian ships unleashed their weapons on the planet below. Each shot could level a city block in seconds. General Paul Harris was deep underground in the NORAD facility when the attack began. The mountain shook around him as the enemy bombarded the surface. Emergency lights flashed red throughout the bunker, and alarms screamed from every direction. Status report. Harris shouted over the noise. We've lost contact with New York, Los Angeles, and Tokyo, reported Lieutenant Amy Rodriguez from her communication station. The orbital defense platforms are gone. All of them. Harris watched the tactical display with growing horror. Red markers showed alien ships positioned over every major city on Earth. They weren't just attacking military targets. They were hitting everything: hospitals, schools, residential areas. This wasn't war. This was genocide. Are any of our weapons still online? The missile silos in Montana are still responding, sir. But our satellites are down. We're firing blind. Harris made the hardest decision of his career. Launch everything we have. All missiles, all orbital strikes. If we're going down, we're taking some of them with us. Above ground, the world was ending. In Chicago, engineer Tony Blake was driving to work when the first alien ship appeared overhead. The massive vessel hung in the sky like a dark cloud, its weapons charging with an evil blue light. Tony slammed on his brakes and ran from his car just as the plasma beam struck downtown. The entire business district vanished in a flash of superheated gas. Buildings that had stood for over a century turned to vapor in seconds. But Tony didn't run away from the destruction. He ran toward it. His training as an engineer kicked in, and he began thinking about what needed to be done. There would be survivors in the rubble, people trapped under collapsed buildings. They would need help. Hey, he called a group of people standing in shock. We need to organize. There are people who need help in there. A woman in a police uniform turned to him. Her badge read Officer Kate Murphy. She was covered in dust and looked stunned, but she was still thinking clearly. You're right, she said, but we need to get underground first. Those ships are still up there. Across the world, similar scenes played out. In London, former Marine Katie Sullivan was in the subway tunnels when the bombing started. The ground shook violently as plasma beams tore through the city above. Emergency lighting flickered on and off, and people screamed in panic. Katie stood up on a bench and shouted, "Everyone calm down. I need you to listen to me." The crowd turned to her. Katie had served in 3 conflicts before retiring to civilian life. She knew how to take charge in a crisis. The tunnels are safe for now, but we need to organize. We need medical teams, search and rescue teams, and communication teams. Who here has medical training? Several people raised their hands. Katie began assigning roles, turning a panicked crowd into a functioning unit. This was what humans did best. They adapted quickly to impossible situations. Back in NORAD, Amy Rodriguez was frantically trying to establish contact with the outside world. Most communication satellites were destroyed, but she had found a way to use an old military frequency that the aliens hadn't jammed. This is Earth Defense Command to all human colonies. Earth is under attack. Repeat, Earth is under attack by alien forces. The enemy fleet consists of hundreds of warships from a coalition calling itself the Zephyrian Empire. She paused, looking at General Harris. He nodded for her to continue. Major cities have been destroyed. Orbital defenses are offline. We are continuing to resist, but the situation is critical. All colonies should prepare for possible follow-up attacks. Do not attempt to send ships to Earth. The enemy fleet is too large. Amy sent the message on repeat, hoping that at least some of the human colonies would receive it. Earth was dying, but humanity was scattered across dozens of star systems. The colonies needed to know what had happened. On the surface, the Zephyrian fleet commander watched the destruction with satisfaction. High Admiral Zexketh had planned this attack for months. Humans were a young species, barely out of their home system. One decisive blow would shatter their confidence and force them to abandon their expansion. Broadcast a surrender demand, Zexketh ordered. The message went out on all frequencies. People of Earth, your resistance is futile. Your major cities lie in ruins. Your defenses are destroyed. Surrender now, and we will allow your colonies to exist under our protection. Continue to resist, and we will exterminate your species completely. But the humans weren't listening to surrender demands. In the ruins of Chicago, Tony Blake had organized a rescue operation that had already pulled 50 people from collapsed buildings. His team included construction workers, doctors, teachers, and students, ordinary people who decided to fight back against impossible odds. "The aliens think we're done," Tony said to his group as they worked to clear debris from a collapsed hospital. "They think bombing our cities would break us. They don't understand humans at all." Kate Murphy nodded as she helped carry an injured woman to safety. "My grandfather fought in World War II. He told me something once. He said humans are at their most dangerous when they have nothing left to lose." In London's underground, Katie Sullivan had established contact with other survivor groups throughout the city. They were sharing resources and information, creating a resistance network that the aliens couldn't touch. "The enemy ships are concentrating on the surface," she reported to her team. "But they're not sending ground troops. They want to destroy us from orbit, then leave. That gives us an advantage." "What advantage?" asked Dr. Peter Wells, a university professor who had taken charge of the medical team. "They don't know the tunnels like we do. They don't know how stubborn humans can be. And they have no idea how angry we are right now." The bombing continued for 6 hours. When it finally stopped, Earth's surface was barely recognizable. Every major city had been hit multiple times. Billions of people were dead, and the survivors were scattered in underground shelters and remote areas. But the survivors were not broken. In bunkers and subway tunnels, in mine shafts and basement shelters, humans were already planning their next move. They were treating the wounded, sharing food and water, and organizing resistance cells. Amy Rodriguez managed to send one final message to the colonies before the aliens found and destroyed her transmitter. "This is Amy Rodriguez, Communications Officer, Earth Defense Command. If anyone receives this, know that Earth still fights. We are not defeated. We will never surrender. Tell the colonies, humanity endures. Make them pay for what they've done here." The message was received on Mars, on the mining colonies in the asteroid belt, and on the agricultural worlds in distant star systems. Within hours, It was being broadcast throughout human space. The Zephyrians had accomplished their goal. Earth was crippled, its major cities destroyed, its orbital defenses eliminated. They expected the human colonies to surrender within days. Instead, they had just made the worst mistake in galactic history. They had given humanity a reason to be truly angry. Commander Steve Parker was reviewing supply reports in his office on Mars Base Alpha when the emergency alert sounded. The piercing alarm hadn't been used since the base was built 20 years ago. Steve dropped his coffee and ran to the communications center. "What's the situation?" he demanded. Communications specialist Linda Hayes looked up from her console with tears in her eyes. "Sir, we just received a transmission from Earth. The planet is under attack by alien forces. Major cities have been destroyed." Steve felt the blood drain from his face. "Show me everything." The main screen displayed Amy Rodriguez's final message from Earth. Steve watched in stunned silence as a young officer described the destruction of humanity's homeworld. When the message ended, the communications center was completely quiet. "How long ago was this sent?" Steve asked. "For hours, sir. We've been trying to confirm the information, but all direct communication with Earth has been cut off." Steve's mind raced. Mars Base Alpha was the largest human settlement outside of Earth, home to over 500,000 people. If the aliens were attacking human colonies, Mars would be their next target. "General alert," he ordered. "All personnel to battle stations. I want every defense system online in 10 minutes." As alarms rang throughout the base, Steve opened a channel to the other colony commanders. Within minutes, he was speaking to leaders from 12 different star systems. "You've all received the same message," Steve said to the group of worried faces on his screen. "Earth has been attacked. We have to assume we're next." Commander Rachel Price spoke up from a mining colony on Kepler 442b. "My people are ready to fight. We've converted our mining lasers into defensive weapons, but we need to coordinate our response." From the agricultural world of Glees, 667C, veteran Sam Turner nodded grimly. "The bastards think they can destroy Earth, and we'll just roll over. They're about to learn how wrong they are." Steve felt a surge of pride. These were his people, human colonists who had left Earth to build new lives among the stars. They weren't soldiers, but they were tough and determined. "We need to share everything we know about these aliens," Steve said, "and we need to prepare for war." Over the next several hours, information flowed between the colonies at an unprecedented rate. Dr. Lisa Carter's analysis of alien communications was transmitted to every human outpost. Jake Morrison's recordings of the enemy fleet were studied by military analysts throughout human space. On Europa, Admiral Karen Stone received the news while inspecting the Jupiter system's ice mining operations. The orbital facilities here could be converted to weapons manufacturing, but it would take time. "How long do we have?" she asked her chief engineer, Mark Johnson. "If the aliens move on the colonies immediately, maybe 2 weeks. If they take time to consolidate their victory at Earth, maybe 2 months. Then we have 2 months to build a fleet that can hurt them. Get every engineer and technician in the system working on this. I want weapons, armor, and engines that these aliens have never seen before." The word was spreading beyond the military commanders. On the civilian transport ship Morningstar, Captain Bill Rogers was carrying 300 colonists to a new settlement when he received the emergency broadcast. He immediately changed course for the nearest military base. "Ladies and gentlemen," he announced to his passengers over the ship's intercom, "I've just received word that Earth has been attacked by hostile aliens. We're diverting to the military base at Wolf 359 to offer our services." The passenger's reaction surprised him. Instead of panic, there was anger. These people had left family and friends on Earth. Many of them had children and grandparents back home who might now be dead. "Captain," called out Dr. Helen Ross, a physicist who had been traveling to establish a new research facility, "my laboratory equipment includes some experimental weapon designs. If the military needs them, they're available." Similar scenes played out on ships throughout human space. Civilian vessels changed course to report to military bases. Scientists offer their research. Engineers volunteered to convert civilian equipment into weapons of war. The aliens had expected the colonies to be scattered and uncoordinated. Instead, they found a species that could organize for war with frightening speed. On the frontier world of Tau Ceti, Colonel Frank Miller received reports from his scouts about strange energy readings near the system's edge. The aliens might already be moving on the colonies. "Sir," reported Sergeant Lisa Brown, "we count 15 large vessels approaching the system. Their energy signatures match the ones from the Earth attack." Miller nodded calmly. "Signal the evacuation ships. Get all non-combatants to the inner planets. Everyone else, prepare for battle." The defense of Tau Ceti lasted 4 hours. Miller's small force was outnumbered 10-1, but they fought with desperate fury. The aliens expected an easy victory like they had achieved at Earth. Instead, they found humans who refused to surrender even when their situation was hopeless. The Zephyrians eventually took the system, but at a cost. 3 of their warships were destroyed, and 2 more were heavily damaged. Most importantly, the human defenders had transmitted everything they learned about alien tactics to the other colonies. "They're not invincible," Miller reported in his final message before his base was overrun. "Their shields can be penetrated. Their weapons have limited range. Fight smart and we can hurt them." The message reached every human colony within hours. Along with the tactical information came something more important: proof that humans could fight these aliens and win. On Mars, Steve Parker was reading Miller's final report when his aide brought him another message. This one was from a source he hadn't expected: the surviving government officials on Earth. "Commander Parker," the message began, "this is President Ellen Davis, speaking from a secure bunker beneath the ruins of Washington. The surface of Earth has been devastated, but humanity endures. We are hereby transferring all governmental authority to the colonial commanders until such time as Earth can be rebuilt." Steve stared at the screen. The president was giving him and the other colony commanders complete freedom to act. No bureaucratic delays, no political debates, just the authority to do whatever was necessary to fight back. "Furthermore," the president continued, "I am authorizing you to declare a state of total war against the Zephyrian Empire and all allied species. Use any means necessary to protect human colonies and to avenge the attack on Earth. We're counting on you." Steve forwarded the message to every colony commander and military base in human space. Within minutes, the response was unanimous. Humanity was going to war. But this wouldn't be the kind of war the aliens expected. The Zephyrians thought in terms of formal battles and negotiated surrenders. Humans were about to show them what total war really meant. On the research station at Alpha Centauri, Dr. Helen Ross was already working on new weapon designs. Her team had developed something they called Phoenix missiles, weapons that could punch through any known shield technology. "The aliens think they understand us," she said to her assistant, Dr. Carl Adams. "They think we're just another species that will follow the same patterns they've seen before. They're wrong." Throughout human space, the word was spreading. Earth had fallen, but humanity would not surrender. The colonies were organizing for war with a speed and determination that shocked even their own leaders. The Zephyrians had destroyed Earth, thinking it would break human spirit. Instead, they had given every human in the galaxy a reason to fight. Now they were about to discover what humans were capable of when they had nothing left to lose. 6 months after Earth burned, humanity was building weapons that would have been impossible before the war. Dr. Helen Ross stood in her laboratory on the Alpha Centauri research station, watching her latest creation take shape. The Phoenix missile was sleek and deadly, designed for one purpose: to punch through Zephyrian shields like they didn't exist. "How does it work?" asked Dr. Carl Adams, her research partner. Carl had lost his wife and children in the bombing of Sydney, and his desire for revenge drove him to work 18-hour days. "Controlled antimatter reactions," Helen explained. "The missile contains a small amount of antimatter in a magnetic containment field. When it hits the target, the field collapses and the antimatter reacts with normal matter. The explosion happens inside the enemy shield." Carl smiled grimly. "The aliens won't know what hit them." Helen nodded, but her expression was troubled. "Carl, this weapon violates every treaty humans ever signed about warfare. If we use this, there's no going back. Good, Carr replied. They burned our world. They murdered our families. I don't care about treaties anymore. This conversation was happening throughout human space. The war had changed humanity in ways no one expected. People who had been scientists and teachers, and farmers were now building weapons of mass destruction. The desire for revenge had unlocked human creativity in terrifying ways. On Europa, engineer Matt Collins was working on his own project. The moon's ice mines had been converted into the largest weapons manufacturing facility in human space. Matt's team was building something they called Hellfire cannons, weapons that could turn stellar energy into focused plasma beams. The power requirements are enormous, explained his assistant, Dr. Nina Bell. Nina had been a peaceful energy researcher before the war. Now she was creating weapons that could destroy entire fleets. We'll tap directly into Jupiter's magnetic field, Matt said. The cannon will draw power from the planet itself. Each shot will have the force of a small star. Nina ran the calculations on her computer. Matt, this is insane. The energy release will be visible from light years away. Everyone in the galaxy will know what we built. Let them know, Matt replied. Let them all know that humanity is done being peaceful. The weapon development was happening at an incredible pace because humans were sharing information like never before. Every discovery was immediately transmitted to every colony. Scientists who had spent their careers guarding research secrets now posted their findings on open networks for anyone to use. Admiral Karen Stone watched the transformation from her command post in the asteroid belt. The Space Around series had become a massive shipyard, building vessels unlike anything humans had ever constructed before. These weren't exploration ships or cargo haulers. These were instruments of war. "Show me the latest design," she said to Chief Engineer Brad Wilson. The holographic display showed a massive warship over a kilometer long. Its hull was black as space, designed to absorb enemy sensor sweeps. Weapon ports covered every surface, and its engines were powerful enough to cross entire star systems in days rather than weeks. "We're calling them Vengeance-class dreadnoughts," Brad explained. "Each one can carry enough firepower to sterilize a planet." Karen studied the design with professional interest. Before the war, she had been a cargo hauler captain. Now she was overseeing the construction of humanity's first true warships. "How many can we build?" "With the resources from the asteroid belt, maybe 50 of these big ones. But we're also building hundreds of smaller ships. Destroyers, frigates, missile boats. Everything we need for a real fleet." The shipyards were working around the clock. Human colonists who had never seen combat were learning to weld armor plating and install weapon systems. Children who should have been in school were helping to load ammunition and program targeting computers. On Mars, Commander Steve Parker was coordinating the overall war effort. His office had become the unofficial capital of human resistance, receiving reports from colonies throughout known space. "The production numbers are incredible," reported his aide, Captain Sue Davis. "We're building weapons and ships faster than any military analyst thought possible." "It's because we're not following military procedures," Steve replied. "We're letting civilians innovate without bureaucratic oversight." A farmer on Kepler 442b just invented a new type of armor plating. A teacher on Wolf 359 designed a targeting system that's better than anything our military ever had. Sue nodded. "The aliens made a mistake when they thought destroying Earth would break us. Instead, they've unleashed human creativity on an unprecedented scale." The Zephyrian Empire was starting to notice the changes in human behavior. High Admiral Zexketh received reports from his intelligence officers that troubled him greatly. "The humans are not behaving as predicted," reported Intelligence Commander Yithnex. "Instead of surrendering, they appear to be mobilizing for total war. Our scouts report massive construction projects throughout human space." Zexketh studied the reports with growing concern. "What kind of construction?" "Weapons, sir. Ships, orbital platforms, research facilities. They're converting their entire civilization into a military machine." This was not what the Zephyrians had expected. In their experience, most species would seek peace negotiations after losing their homeworld. The few that didn't usually fought with conventional weapons and tactics. Humans were doing something completely different. Double the patrols around their colonies, Zexketh ordered. I want to know what they're planning. But human security had improved dramatically since the war began. The colonies were using new encryption methods and communication protocols that the aliens couldn't break. Every transmission was coded. Every ship movement was disguised. Every research project was hidden behind layers of deception. On the hidden research station at Proxima Centauri, physicist Dr. Sarah Kim was working on humanity's most secret project. Her team was developing something that would change warfare forever, weapons that could manipulate space and time itself. The theoretical foundation is solid, she explained to her team. We can create localized distortions in space-time that will make our ships effectively untouchable. Enemy weapons will pass right through us. Her colleague, Dr. Mike Foster, looked skeptical. Sarah, we're talking about technologies that are centuries beyond current human science. How could we possibly build this in a few months? Sarah smiled, because we're not thinking like peacetime scientists anymore. We're thinking like desperate humans who have nothing to lose. Sometimes desperation leads to breakthroughs that normal research never achieves. The weapon development wasn't just about raw firepower. Humans were also creating new defensive technologies, new ship designs, and new tactical concepts. They were preparing to fight a war unlike anything the galaxy had ever seen. Dr. Helen Ross finished the final calculations for her Phoenix missile and sent the data to every human military base. Within hours, the weapon was being mass-produced throughout human space. Similar developments were happening everywhere, new technology spreading from colony to colony at the speed of light. The aliens think they know what we're capable of, Helen said to Carl as they watched the first production missiles roll off the assembly line. They've studied human history, and they think they understand our military potential. They're about to learn that they've only seen humans at peace. They have no idea what we become when we're truly angry. Carl nodded, watching the deadly missiles being loaded onto transport ships. How long until we're ready? 6 more months, Helen replied. Then we show them what humans do to species that attack our homeworld. Throughout human space, similar conversations were taking place. Humanity was transforming itself into something the galaxy had never seen before. An entire species united in purpose, driven by grief and rage, and armed with weapons that pushed the boundaries of known science. The Zephyrians had 6 months to enjoy their victory over Earth. After that, they would face the full fury of an aroused humanity. 18 months after the bombing of Earth, humanity was ready to answer fire with fire. Captain Alex Johnson stood on the bridge of the dreadnought Vengeance, watching the tactical display show the Wolf 359 system ahead. This would be humanity's first major strike against the Zephyrian Empire, and Alex knew the entire human race was watching. Status report, he ordered. All systems green, Captain, replied his tactical officer, Lieutenant Tom Bradley. Phoenix missiles are loaded and ready. Hellfire cannons are charged to full capacity. Alex nodded. The Vengeance was the first of the new Vengeance-class dreadnoughts, armed with every weapon humanity had developed since the war began. Behind them came 50 other ships, a mix of military vessels and converted civilian craft crewed by volunteers who had lost everything when Earth burned. Communications, patch me through to the fleet. Channel open, sir. Alex looked at the camera that would broadcast his words to every ship in the assault force. Today we begin to make them pay for what they did to Earth. The enemy thinks they've already won this war. They think we'll follow their rules and fight their kind of battles. They're wrong. Through the view screen, Alex could see the other ships in formation around the Vengeance. Each one carried humans who had volunteered for what might be a suicide mission. They all knew the odds, but they had come anyway. Remember, Alex continued, we're not just fighting for revenge. We're fighting to make sure no other species ever thinks they can attack humanity and get away with it. Today, the galaxy learns what happens when you make humans angry. The Wolf 359 system contained the largest Zephyrian military depot outside their home territory. Intelligence reports indicated over 300 alien warships stationed there, along with supply bases and weapons manufacturing facilities. It was considered impregnable by galactic standards. Approaching the outer system boundary, reported navigator Lisa Chong. Enemy sensors are starting to ping us. Let them see us coming, Alex said. I want them to know we're here. The Zephyrian Fleet commander at Wolf 359, Admiral Kethvex, watched the human approach with contempt. His intelligence reports had indicated the humans were building new ships, but this looked like a pathetic force compared to his 300 vessels. 50 ships, he said to his aide. The humans are even more foolish than we thought. Signal the fleet to prepare for battle. This will be over quickly. But Admiral Kethvex didn't understand what he was really facing. These weren't the same humans who had been caught off guard at Earth. These humans had spent 18 months preparing for this moment, and they were carrying weapons the galaxy had never seen before. Enemy fleet is moving to intercept, reported Tom Bradley. They're forming a traditional battle line. Alex smiled grimly. Traditional tactics. They still don't understand what they're dealing with. All ships implement Phoenix Protocol. Throughout the human fleet, crews prepared to use their new weapons for the first time in combat. The Phoenix missiles were loaded into launching tubes, their antimatter warhead stable and ready. The Hellfire cannons were charged with energy drawn from the system star itself. Range to target? Alex asked. 2 million kilometers and closing. Fire Phoenix missiles. Full spread. The first salvo contained over 200 missiles, each one carrying enough antimatter to destroy a city. They accelerated toward the Zephyrian fleet at speeds that pushed the limits of known technology. Admiral Kethvex watched the incoming missiles with confusion rather than concern. Activate defensive screens. These primitive weapons cannot penetrate our shields. But the Phoenix missiles weren't primitive at all. As they struck the Zephyrian shields, their antimatter warheads detonated inside protective barriers. The explosions tore through alien ships like they were made of paper. Impossible! Kethvex screamed as his flagship's bridge filled with smoke. Our shields are the best in the galaxy. Not anymore, Alex said, though the alien couldn't hear him. Hellfire cannons. Target their command ships. The massive energy weapons fired beams of concentrated plasma that had been drawn from the star's corona. Each beam carried the power of a solar flare, focused into a weapon that could cut through any known armor. The Zephyrian fleet was being torn apart. Ships that had never taken serious damage in centuries of warfare were exploding one after another. The alien superior numbers meant nothing against weapons they had never encountered before. Sir, reported Tom Bradley with excitement in his voice, their entire first wave is gone. 60 ships destroyed in under 10 minutes. But Alex wasn't celebrating yet. What about the rest of their fleet? They're pulling back to the inner system. It looks like they're trying to regroup around their space stations. Alex studied the tactical display. The remaining Zephyrian ships were clustering around 3 massive orbital platforms, using them as shields while they tried to figure out what had just happened to their fleet. They think the stations will protect them, Alex said. Show them how wrong they are. All ships, advance to minimum range. Prepare for close combat. The human fleet moved deeper into the system, past the wreckage of the first Zephyrian wave. Enemy weapons fired at them, but the new human armor absorbed most of the damage. The ships that did take hits kept fighting, their crews driven by 18 months of planning and anger. Dr. Helen Ross watched the battle from the science vessel Discovery, one of the support ships in the human fleet. Her Phoenix missiles were working perfectly, but she felt no joy in watching the destruction. This was necessary, but it was still terrible. The antimatter reactions are exactly as predicted, she reported to Alex over the communication channel. Their shields can't adapt to weapons that detonate inside the barrier. Understood. Continue monitoring the weapon's performance. We need to know if they develop countermeasures. But the Zephyrians had no countermeasures for weapons they didn't understand. Their entire military doctrine was based on shield technology that the humans had just made obsolete. Ship after ship died as Phoenix missiles found their targets. Admiral Kethvex made one final desperate attempt to salvage the battle. All ships ram the human vessels. If we cannot stop their weapons, we'll take them down with us. Several alien ships broke from formation and accelerated toward the human fleet. But Alex had anticipated this tactic. Launch interceptor drones. Don't let them reach us. Small automated ships launched from the human vessels, each one carrying a single Phoenix missile. They met the charging Zephyrian ships head-on, detonating their antimatter warheads in proximity explosions that vaporized everything within 1,000 kilometers. The battle was over. 300 Zephyrian warships had been reduced to wreckage in less than 2 hours. The supposedly impregnable Wolf 359 system now belonged to humanity, but Alex wasn't finished. He opened a communication channel to the surviving aliens on the orbital stations. "This is Captain Alex Johnson of the human fleet. You have 2 minutes to evacuate your facilities before we destroy them. This is your only warning." The alien response was immediate and panicked. Escape pods began launching from the stations as Zephyrian personnel fled for their lives. They had never faced an enemy that gave evacuation warnings before destroying military targets. After exactly 2 minutes, Alex gave the order. Hellfire cannons destroy the stations. The massive energy weapons fired once more, their beams carving to the orbital platforms like hot knives through butter. Within minutes, the largest Zephyrian military base outside their home territory was nothing but expanding clouds of debris. "Sir," reported Lisa Chong, "we're receiving surrender signals from the remaining alien ships throughout the system." Alex thought for a moment. The smart tactical decision would be to accept their surrender and take prisoners. But Alex remembered the burning cities of Earth, and his decision was made by his heart rather than his head. "Signal the fleet," he said quietly. "No survivors. No prisoners. They gave our homeworld no mercy, so we give them none." The remaining Zephyrian ships died one by one, their desperate surrender signals ignored by humans who had not forgotten the sight of Earth burning. When the last enemy vessel was destroyed, Alex broadcast a message on all frequencies throughout the system. "This is humanity's answer to the bombing of Earth. You thought we would break when you destroyed our homeworld. Instead, you've taught us what we're capable of when we're truly angry. This is only the beginning." The message was picked up by Zephyrian communication networks and transmitted throughout their empire. For the first time since the war began, the aliens realized they might have made a terrible mistake. The humans weren't following the rules of civilized warfare. They weren't seeking negotiated settlements or limited objectives. They were fighting for total victory, using weapons that made traditional defenses useless. The Battle of Wolf 359 was over, but its impact was just beginning. Throughout the galaxy, other species watched the recordings of human weapons destroying an entire Zephyrian fleet. The balance of power was shifting, and everyone knew it. Humanity had answered the bombing of Earth with fire, and the galaxy would never be the same. The victory at Wolf 359 was just the beginning. Over the next 6 months, human fleets struck deep into Zephyrian territory, winning battle after battle with their revolutionary weapons. The alien superior numbers meant nothing against technology they couldn't counter. Captain Ryan Cole commanded the human fleet that cornered the main Zephyrian battle group at the Vega system. His ships surrounded the enemy like wolves circling wounded prey, using tactics that would have horrified human military commanders before the war. "Sir," reported his tactical officer, Lieutenant Kate Wilson, "the enemy fleet is requesting terms of surrender." Ryan studied the tactical display. 60 Zephyrian warships were trapped between his force and a gravity well that would prevent them from escaping. These were the same ships that had participated in the destruction of Earth's orbital defenses. "Signal them back," Ryan said coldly. "Tell them we don't accept surrenders from species that bomb civilian targets." The Zephyrian fleet commander, Admiral Nexcole, received a human response with growing desperation. His intelligence officers had warned him that humans were fighting differently than expected, but he still hoped for a negotiated end to the battle. "Offer them our withdrawal from human space," he ordered his communications officer. "Surely they will accept our retreat in exchange for our lives." But Ryan Cole had seen the recordings from Earth. His sister had died in the bombing of Denver, along with her 2 young children. The idea of letting these aliens escape to fight again was unthinkable. "Launch asteroids," he ordered. Human ships had developed a terrifying new tactic. They would capture asteroids from nearby systems and accelerate them to near-light speed using their advanced engines. The rocks became weapons of mass destruction, impossible to stop and carrying the kinetic energy of nuclear bombs. The Zephyrian fleet tried to shoot down the incoming asteroids, but there were too many coming from too many directions. When the first rock hit Admiral Nexgold's flagship, the explosion was visible from 3 star systems away. No survivors. Ryan announced his fleet. These are the same ships that murdered our families. Show them the same mercy they showed Earth. The Battle of Vega lasted 4 hours. When it ended, 60 Zephyrian warships had been completely destroyed. No escape pods were recovered. No prisoners were taken. The human fleet broadcast the same message that was becoming their standard warning to the galaxy. This is humanity's justice for the bombing of Earth. Any species that supports the Zephyrian Empire will face the same fate. The message reached every corner of the galaxy within days. Species that had joined the Zephyrian Coalition for Protection began to reconsider their alliance. The humans weren't just winning battles. They were fighting with ruthless efficiency that terrified even neutral observers. Commander Julie Adams was developing the tactical innovations that made human victories possible. Her background as a logistics coordinator had given her insights that traditional military officers missed. She understood that wars were won by destroying the enemy's ability to fight, not just their willingness. "We're not targeting their fleets," she explained to Admiral Karen Stone during a strategy meeting. "We're targeting their entire war-making capacity. Food supplies, fuel depots, communication networks, manufacturing centers. We're going to strangle them slowly." Karen studied the tactical projections on her screen. Julie's strategy was working perfectly. Entire Zephyrian sectors were going dark as human raiders destroyed their infrastructure. How are their member species reacting? "That's the beautiful part," Julie replied with a smile that held no warmth. "They're starting to blame each other. The Karathi are saying the Zephyrians dragged them into an unwinnable war. The Veltar are demanding separate peace negotiations. The coalition is falling apart." This was exactly what humanity wanted. The Zephyrian Empire had been held together by the promise of mutual protection and shared prosperity. Now that they were losing badly to the humans, old tensions between member species were resurging. On the agricultural world of Altair Prime, the Karathi government was meeting in emergency session. Prime Minister Yevkora had received reports on the front lines that filled her with dread. "The humans are not fighting like any species we've encountered," reported her military advisor, General Nothrex. "They use weapons that bypass our defenses. They show no mercy to defeated enemies. And they're targeting civilian infrastructure as well as military assets." Yevkora studied the battle reports with growing horror. The humans had just destroyed a Karathi food processing facility that fed 3 star systems. The attack had been surgical. No civilians were killed, but millions would now face hunger. "Why would they target food supplies?" she asked. "To force us out of the war," General Nothrex replied. "They're not trying to conquer us. They're trying to make continuing the fight too expensive to justify." Meanwhile, the human fleet under Captain Dennis Clark was implementing Julie Adams' strategy throughout Zephyrian space. They would jump into a system, destroy key infrastructure, and leave before enemy reinforcements could arrive. "Target identified," reported a sensor operator, Ensign Mary Foster. "Fuel refinery on the 3rd planet. No military escorts detected." Dennis nodded. "1 Phoenix missile should do it. Make sure you target the facility, not the residential areas. We're not terrorists." This distinction was important to the humans. They were fighting to win, but they still maintained some limits on their warfare. Military targets and infrastructure were fair game, but they tried to avoid unnecessary civilian casualties. The Zephyrian Empire was discovering that these limits made the humans even more dangerous, not less. Species throughout the galaxy could see that humans were capable of mercy when they chose to show it, which made their ruthless treatment of military targets even more terrifying. High Admiral Zexketh received daily reports of new defeats and new defections from the Coalition. The war that was supposed to last a few weeks had now dragged on for over 2 years, and the Zephyrians were losing badly. "The Veltar have announced their withdrawal from the Alliance," his aide reported. "They're seeking a separate peace with the humans." Zexketh felt his carefully constructed empire crumbling around him. What terms are the humans offering? Complete withdrawal from all human-claimed systems, war reparations equal to 50% of gross planetary product for 10 years, and the delivery of all military commanders who participated in the Earth bombing for trial by human courts. The terms were harsh, but not impossible. The humans were offering genuine peace to species willing to abandon the Zephyrian cause. This was causing mass defections from the coalition as member species decided that continued alliance with the Zephyrians wasn't worth facing human wrath. Dr. Helen Ross watched the political developments from her laboratory on the Alpha Centauri research station. Her weapons had made the human victories possible, but she took no joy in the destruction they caused. "The war will be over soon," she said to Dr. Carl Adams. "The Zephyrian coalition is collapsing." Carl nodded, but his expression remained grim. "What happens after we win? The galaxy is terrified of us now. Will we ever be able to have peaceful relations with other species again?" Helen had been wondering the same thing. Humanity had proven it could wage war with unprecedented effectiveness. But that success came with a price. Every species in the galaxy now saw humans as a potential threat to their own survival. "We'll have to be very careful," she replied. "We've shown that we can destroy anyone who attacks us. Now we need to show that we can be trusted not to attack unprovoked. But first, the war had to be won completely." The Zephyrians still controlled their core systems, and High Admiral Zexketh was preparing for a final desperate defense. He had gathered the remnants of his fleet around the Zephyrian homeworld, hoping to make the cost of human victory too high to accept. Admiral Karen Stone was planning humanity's final offensive from her flagship, the massive dreadnought Retribution. The battle for the Zephyrian homeworld would determine whether the war ended with negotiated peace or total Zephyrian defeat. "How many ships can we bring to bear?" she asked her planning staff. "400 vessels," replied her chief of staff, Captain Alan Ross. "Every operational ship in human space, plus volunteer crews from some of our new allied species." Karen nodded. The humans had gained some allies among species that had been oppressed by the Zephyrian Empire. These species saw human victory as their chance for freedom from alien domination. "Signal the fleet," Karen ordered. "We're going to end this war once and for all. It's time to bring the fire to their homeworld and show them what happens when you bomb Earth." The final battle of the war was about to begin, and the entire galaxy was watching to see how it would end. 2.5 years after Earth burned, the largest human fleet in history approached the Zephyrian homeworld of Ketcha Prime. Admiral Dan Foster stood on the bridge of the Super Dreadnought Judgment, watching his tactical displays show over 400 human warships in perfect formation. "Final status report," he ordered. "All ships report ready for battle," replied his operations officer, Captain Lisa Ward. "Phoenix missiles loaded, Hellfire cannons charged, asteroid bombardment systems prepared." Dan nodded grimly. This fleet represented every operational human warship, plus volunteer vessels from 6 species that had broken away from the Zephyrian Empire. They had come here for one purpose: to end the war by destroying the enemy's ability to continue fighting. The Zephyrian homeworld was the most heavily defended planet in the galaxy. Massive orbital fortresses surrounded it like a steel shell. Shield generators on the surface created overlapping barriers that could supposedly stop any weapon. The Zephyrian High Command had spent centuries making their homeworld impregnable. They were about to learn that human weapons made traditional defenses useless. "Sir," reported Communications Officer Nancy Price, "we're receiving a transmission from the planet's surface. It's High Admiral Zexketh." "Put him on screen." The Zephyrian commander appeared on the main display. He looked older than his intelligence photos, worn down by 2 years of constant defeats. But his voice was still steady when he spoke. "Human fleet, this is High Admiral Zexketh of the Zephyrian Defense Force. I am authorized to offer terms for the cessation of hostilities." Dan studied the alien leader with cold eyes. This was the being who had ordered the destruction of Earth, who had murdered billions of innocent civilians in the belief that it would break human resistance. "I'm listening," Dan replied. "The Zephyrian Empire offers complete withdrawal from all systems claimed by humanity. We will pay war reparations and agree to a demilitarized zone between our territories. In return, you'll spare our homeworld from attack." Dan was quiet for a long moment. Around him, the bridge crew waited to hear his response. Every person on every ship in the fleet was listening, knowing that his next words would determine how the war ended. "High Admiral," Dan said finally, When you bombed Earth, did you offer terms to our civilians before you murdered them? Zexketha's alien features tightened. That was a military necessity. Your expansion threatened galactic stability. Our expansion, Dan repeated. We were building farms and research stations. You saw peaceful colonization as a military threat. That tells me everything I need to know about your species' mindset. Dr. Carol West watched the conversation from her position aboard the science vessel Breakthrough. She had developed new broadcasting technology that allowed humans to transmit directly to alien populations, bypassing their government's communication filters. Admiral, she said over a private channel to Dan, I can show the Zephyrian population what really happened at Earth. The recordings from our orbital stations captured everything before they were destroyed. Dan nodded slightly. Do it. Let them see what their leaders ordered. Throughout Ketchaprime, every communication device suddenly displayed the same images. Orbital recordings of the Zephyrian fleet bombarding Earth's major cities. Children running through burning streets. Hospitals exploding under plasma fire. Civilian evacuation ships being destroyed as they tried to flee. The impact on the Zephyrian population was immediate and devastating. They had been told that the attack on Earth was a surgical strike against military targets. Now they saw the truth. Their government had committed genocide against innocent civilians. You lied to us, screamed one Zephyrian civilian in a broadcast that reached the human fleet. You told us we were fighting a military threat, not murdering children. Similar scenes were playing out across the planet. The Zephyrian people were realizing that their leaders had started an unwinnable war through acts of mass murder. Public demonstrations began in major cities, demanding immediate surrender. High Admiral Zexketha's image reappeared on Dan's screen, but now he looked desperate. Admiral Foster, you are interfering with internal Zephyrian affairs. This is a violation of galactic law. Dan laughed bitterly. Galactic law? You're going to lecture me about law after you bombarded civilian targets? Your entire species is going to see exactly what you did to Earth, and then they're going to decide whether they want to keep following leaders who commit genocide. The orbital fortresses around Ketchaprime began powering up their weapons, but the human fleet was ready. The Battle of Ketchaprime would showcase 2.5 years of human tactical evolution. Launched the first wave. Dan ordered Phoenix missiles streaked toward the orbital fortresses, their antimatter warheads designed to penetrate any shield. But the humans had learned from previous battles. These weren't just aimed at the fortresses themselves. They were targeting the connection points between the stations and the planet's power grid. The explosions were visible from the surface as one by one, the orbital fortresses lost power and went dark. Their massive guns fell silent, their shields collapsed, and their automated systems shut down. Second wave. Target the shield generators on the surface. Hellfire cannons fired concentrated stellar energy at the planet below, precisely targeting the installations that maintained Ketchaprime's protective barriers. Each shot was calibrated to destroy the generators without causing unnecessary damage to nearby civilian areas. The Zephyrian military tried to respond, but their weapons couldn't penetrate the new human armor. Ships that had been invincible for centuries were now helpless against human technology. Captain Roy Miller commanded a squadron of human destroyers that penetrated the inner defense ring around Ketchaprime. His mission was to demonstrate human precision rather than human destructive power. Target the military command center, he ordered. 1 Phoenix missile minimum yield. The antimatter warhead struck the Zephyrian military headquarters with surgical precision. The building vaporized instantly, but the surrounding city blocks were untouched. It was a demonstration that humans could destroy any target they chose, while sparing any target they wanted to protect. The message was clear. The Zephyrian military was completely helpless, but the civilian population would be spared if they cooperated. On the planet's surface, Zephyrian civilians watched human ships flying overhead with weapons that could level cities, but chose not to use them. The contrast with their own military's behavior at Earth was stark and deliberate. Admiral, reported Nancy Price, we're receiving thousands of communications from the planet's surface. Zephyrian civilians are demanding their government's immediate surrender. Dan nodded. The psychological warfare was working perfectly. The Zephyrian people could see that humans had the power to destroy their world, but were choosing restraint. They could also see the recordings of what their own leaders had done to Earth's civilians. High Admiral Zexketh appeared on screen one final time, his face showing complete defeat. Admiral Foster, the Zephyrian Defense Council, is prepared to discuss terms. There are no terms to discuss, Dan replied. Unconditional surrender, or we continue the demonstration. You have 1 hour to evacuate all military personnel from the capital city. After that, we're going to show your people what happens to the buildings where genocide is planned. The Zephyrian evacuation was swift and panicked. Military vehicles raced through the capital as officers and officials fled the government district. The civilian population watched their leaders run away, abandoning the war they had started. Exactly 1 hour later, human weapons destroyed every government and military building in the Zephyrian capital. The strikes were precise. Only official buildings were targeted, while civilian structures remained untouched. The Zephyrian military command structure is completely eliminated, reported Captain Lisa Ward. Their government has ceased to function. Dan opened a communication channel to the entire planet. People of Ketcher Prime, your leaders started this war by murdering innocent humans. They told you lies about our intentions and led your species into a conflict you couldn't win. The war is over. Your military has been defeated. Your government has fallen. He paused, letting his words sink in throughout the planet. But you are not our enemies. You were deceived by leaders who valued their own power more than your lives. Humanity offers peace to any Zephyrian who renounces the policies that led to this war. Help us rebuild, and you will be treated as equals. Continue to support those who order genocide, and you will share their fate. The response from Ketcher Prime was immediate. Zephyrian civilians began gathering in the streets, demanding the surrender of any remaining military commanders. They had seen human restraint and human power demonstrated simultaneously. They understood that cooperation offered survival, while resistance offered only destruction. Within hours, every major Zephyrian leader who had participated in the Earth bombing was in human custody. The Zephyrian Empire had formally ceased to exist, its government dissolved, and its military eliminated. The siege of Ketcher Prime was over, but its impact would be felt throughout the galaxy. Humanity had demonstrated that they could wage total war when necessary, but they could also show mercy to defeated enemies who accepted responsibility for their actions. The war that began with the bombing of Earth had ended with the complete victory of human forces. But now came the harder task, building a peace that would prevent such conflicts in the future. The formal surrender ceremony took place in the ruins of New York City, exactly 3 years after the Zephyrian attack. Admiral Ben Walker, who had survived the bombing in his underground bunker, stood among the rebuilt foundations of what had once been the United Nations building. The symbolism was deliberate and powerful. Representatives from every species in the galaxy had come to witness the end of the war, standing in a city that had been destroyed, but was now rising from its ashes. High Admiral Zexketh, flanked by human guards, approached a makeshift podium where the surrender documents waited. His once proud uniform was wrinkled and stained, his alien features showing the strain of total defeat. Behind him walked the surviving members of the Zephyrian War Council, each one facing trial for genocide. The Zephyrian Empire formally surrenders all military forces and territorial claims. Zexketh read from the prepared statement. We accept full responsibility for the unprovoked attack on the human homeworld and agree to all terms imposed by the human government. Admiral Walker accepted the documents with steady hands, but his voice carried the weight of 3 years of war and the memory of billions of dead. The surrender is accepted. The war is over. The crowd that had gathered was mostly human, but representatives from dozens of alien species were also present. They watched with a mixture of relief and apprehension as humanity's war finally came to an end. Captain Jake Morrison, who had been exploring space when the war began, now commanded the rebuilt exploration fleet. He stood with the crowd, thinking about how much everything had changed since that day when his ship first detected the Zephyrian fleet approaching Earth. It's finished, said Dr. Lisa Carter, who stood beside him. She had spent the war years developing new defensive technologies rather than weapons, preparing for the peace that would follow victory. Jake nodded, but his expression was troubled. The shooting war is finished. But look around, Lisa. Look at how the other species are watching us. Lisa followed his gaze to the alien delegates. They stood apart from the humans, speaking in quiet groups and casting nervous glances at the human fleet that orbited overhead. The fear in their behavior was obvious. "They're afraid of us," she said quietly. "Can you blame them? We just fought a 3-year war against the most powerful empire in the galaxy and won decisively. We used weapons that made their best technology useless. And we did it all while most of our population was still learning how to fight. This was the price of victory." Humanity had proven beyond doubt that attacking Earth was the worst mistake any species could make. But in doing so, they had also demonstrated a capacity for warfare that terrified every other civilization in the galaxy. President Ellen Davis, who had survived the war in a deep bunker beneath the ruins of Washington, addressed the gathering as the ceremony concluded. "Today marks the end of the darkest chapter in human history. Our homeworld was attacked, our cities burned, our people murdered by those who feared our peaceful expansion into space." Her voice carried across the rebuilt plaza, heard by millions throughout human space and broadcast to every world in the galaxy. But we survived. We adapted. We built weapons and ships and technologies that turned the tide of battle. We proved that humanity cannot be destroyed by those who mistake our peaceful nature for weakness. President Davis paused, her eyes finding the alien delegates in the crowd. "However, this victory comes with responsibility. We have shown the galaxy what humans can do when pushed to our breaking point. Now we must show the galaxy what humans can do when we choose to build rather than destroy." The rebuilding of Earth had become humanity's most important project. The planet's major cities were rising from their ruins, but they were different now. The new buildings incorporated lessons learned from the war, better defenses, more efficient designs, and technologies that would have been impossible before the conflict. Tony Blake, who had organized rescue operations in the ruins of Chicago, now supervised the construction of the city's new downtown district. The buildings were taller and stronger than their predecessors, designed to survive attacks that would have leveled the old structures. "The new Chicago will house 2 million people," he explained to a group of visiting engineers from the colonies. "But it's also designed to be completely self-sufficient if cut off from the outside world. We learned that independence is just as important as size." Similar projects were underway throughout Earth. New York, London, Tokyo, and dozens of other cities were being rebuilt with wartime lessons in mind. They would be beautiful and efficient, but they would also be capable of surviving another attack. Admiral Karen Stone commanded the human fleet that maintained security throughout known space. The ships that had been built for war were now being converted for peacekeeping and exploration missions. "The challenge isn't military anymore," she explained to her staff officers. "It's diplomatic. Every species in the galaxy knows we can destroy them if we choose to. Now we have to convince them that we won't choose to unless they force us." This was proving more difficult than winning the war had been. Species that had been neutral during the conflict were now forming defensive alliances, worried that humans might decide to continue their expansion by force. The same rapid growth that had originally frightened the Zephyrians was now causing concern throughout the galaxy. Dr. Helen Ross, whose weapons had made human victory possible, now worked on technologies for peaceful purposes. Her antimatter research was being applied to power generation and space travel rather than weapons development. "We've proven we can wage war more effectively than anyone expected," she said to her research team. "Now we need to prove we can wage peace just as effectively." But the transition wasn't easy. Many humans had been chained by the war in ways that made peacetime adjustment difficult. Veterans who had spent 3 years fighting for survival found it hard to trust alien species, even those that had never been enemies. Captain Ryan Cole, who had commanded human fleets throughout the war, now led diplomatic missions to species seeking peace treaties with humanity. His flagship had been converted from a warship into a mobile embassy, carrying diplomats instead of weapons. "The war taught us that humans are capable of things we never imagined," he said to the Karathi delegation during peace negotiations. "We developed new technologies, new tactics, and new levels of determination. But the war also taught us that we prefer to build rather than destroy." The Karathi Prime Minister, Yeth Kora, listened carefully to Ryan's words. Her species had been among the first to break away from the Zephyrian alliance, and she was genuinely interested in establishing good relations with humanity. "Your species fought with unprecedented efficiency," she said, "but you also showed restraint when you could have caused much greater destruction. This gives us hope that peaceful coexistence is possible." Ryan nodded. "Humanity learned something important during the war. We discovered that we're much more dangerous when we're angry than we ever realized. That knowledge comes with responsibility. We have to make sure we never give other species reasons to fear us unnecessarily." The peace negotiations were succeeding, but slowly. Each new treaty required careful diplomacy to overcome the fear that human military capabilities had created. Species throughout the galaxy wanted assurance that humanity would not use its advanced weapons for conquest. Captain Jake Morrison led the first post-war exploration mission beyond the boundaries of known space. His new ship, the Starbound II, was designed for peaceful contact with unknown civilizations. Its weapons were defensive only, and its primary mission was scientific research. "We're going back to what we were doing before the war," Jake explained to his crew as they prepared to depart. "We're explorers, not conquerors. The galaxy needs to see that humans can be peaceful neighbors when we're not being attacked." The exploration missions were part of humanity's larger strategy for post-war relations. By demonstrating peaceful intentions through actions rather than just words, humans hope to rebuild trust with other species. Back on Earth, children played in the parks of rebuilt cities, while overhead, human patrol fleets maintained their silent watch. The memorial walls in every city carried the names of those who had died in the Zephyrin attack, but the rebuilding around those memorials showed that humanity had survived and grown stronger. The war had ended with humanity's complete victory, but that victory had come at a cost. Earth had been rebuilt, the enemy had been defeated, and the colonies had been secured. But humanity now carried the burden of being the galaxy's most feared military power. In the New York Memorial Park, a simple inscription had been carved into black stone. "They thought we would break when they bombed our world. Instead, they taught us that sometimes the only way to preserve peace is to be so terrifyingly good at war that no one dares threaten again." The inscription captured the essential truth of what humanity had learned. Peace was not maintained through weakness or good intentions alone. Sometimes peace required the strength to utterly destroy those who would disturb it. As Jake Morrison's exploration fleet departed for unknown regions of space, humanity began its next chapter. They had survived the test of total war and emerged victorious. Now they faced a more difficult challenge of proving that a species capable of such devastating warfare could also be trusted with peace. The galaxy watched and waited to see what humanity would become. The species that had answered the bombing of Earth with fire now had to show that they could build a better future for everyone. The war was over, but the story of humanity's place in the galaxy was just beginning.